So I'm kind of a quote nerd. I'm always getting that notification on my phone that my storage is almost full, and it is primarily because of screenshots of quotes that I've come across online. And, if I'm being honest, pictures of my pug, Tank. The idea that something someone said decades or even centuries ago has the ability to impact our lives today is such a beautiful testament to the power of language. 3 quotes in particular have most profoundly shaped my life that I would like to share with you today. The first, in 161 AD, Stoic philosopher and Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius said, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." With this simple statement, Aurelius introduced a novel concept. We are not at the mercy of our life's events and circumstances, but rather we are the creators of our lives through our thoughts about those events and circumstances. In a time where nearly every aspect of someone's life was predetermined by the class they were born into, the idea that people have the agency to choose what they think about that life was revolutionary and empowering. In 1603, William Shakespeare expanded on this idea in Hamlet, writing, "Nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so." Hamlet says this to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern as an explanation as to how the state of Denmark can feel safe and pleasant for them, yet feel like a prison for him. They're obviously living in the same Denmark, and in that moment they're even standing on the same patch of ground, yet are having 2 completely different experiences based on their own individual perceptions of their circumstances. This was an evolution from Aurelius's foundational idea that not that we can choose our own thoughts, to now Shakespeare's idea that not only can we choose our thoughts, we can choose to perceive anything as good or bad. No event has any inherent qualities, but rather we have the ability to assign negative or positive connotations. In the 1940s, this idea surfaces again with Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. Reflecting on his time spent enslaved in concentration camps, Frankl wrote, "Everything could be taken from a man but one thing, the last of all human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Frankl's personal testimony to the power of choice in even the most dire and horrific of circumstances serves as perhaps the most compelling evidence that the incredible power of self-determination is always available to us. So, how can we leverage this timeless quality of agency of thought to enhance our lives today? You probably already have. I'm sure you've had things happen in your life that initially you were incredibly upset about, but later felt totally differently about. Maybe you lost a job you loved, but it led you to finding your true passion. Maybe you went through an incredibly painful breakup or divorce, but now you see it as the best thing that ever happened to you. How does that happen? The event doesn't change. You did lose your job. You did break up. What changed? Only your perception of that event changed. In the mid-1990s, professors of psychological science at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, questioned, how does an immutable event from our past change from negative to positive? And further, if we know how that happens, can we consciously change our past challenges and traumas into positive growth and assets? To study this, Calhoun and Tedeschi spoke with participants who had experienced some sort of trauma in their lives and now report positive feelings around that trauma and their subsequent quality of life. These participants endured a range of traumas from sexual trauma to cancer diagnoses, relationship breakup, bereavements. The study of these participants discovered commonalities and patterns that Calhoun and Tedeschi distilled into a blueprint for turning trauma into transformation, a phenomenon they call post-traumatic growth. I personally, inadvertently, lived this process, and it changed my life. The first part in this process is disruption of a core belief. A core belief is a deeply ingrained, foundational assumption we hold that shapes our self-perception and informs our behavior. For example, it's that little voice inside your head that says, I am only valuable if I am married, or I am only valuable if I have this certain type of job. And then if we don't have those things, we feel less valuable. My core belief was that the only way to live a good, happy, successful life was to do really well on my SATs, get into and graduate from a good college, complete some sort of postgraduate education, get married, and buy a house, all before the scariest possible age to me, 30, at the latest. And any variation from that path meant failure. I did pretty well on my SATs, and I got into a good college. But at some point along the way for me, college partying escalated into full-blown IV, meth, and heroin addiction. And by the time I was 34 years old, I'd been homeless and in and out of jail for years and was living in a doghouse in my heroin dealer's backyard. Now, I'm sure that we can all agree that living in a doghouse in a drug dealer's backyard in your mid-30s isn't peak adulthood for anyone, regardless of SAT scores. But my core belief deemed that I would now never have a good life, addiction or not. By my 35th birthday, I had made my way out of that doghouse and into a sober living, and I finally had 90 days sober. Now, at that point, I'd been homeless for so long, I had literally nothing to my name. No clothes, no possessions, I didn't even have personal identification. Now, in sober environments like the one that I was in, everyone tells you, that's okay, don't worry about it, just focus on your sobriety, focus on your clean time, like that's what matters. And while 90 days sober is certainly an achievement, I just couldn't shake the thought, I think highlighted by turning 35, that I had failed miserably as a person. Again, largely because my core belief dictated that as a fact. The second part in this process is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation can look like meditation, journaling, breath work, anything that helps us restore regulation to our nervous system after the dysregulation of a trauma. Meditation in particular stimulates the vagus nerve, which allows us to relax. Meditation is a pretty big component of most sobriety programs. So as part of my recovery work, I was meditating pretty consistently. So I did know on a day like that day on my birthday, when I was feeling so down, that meditation could help. So I went out on the balcony of my sober living, and I put my headphones in, and I did this meditation. And the quote for that day was from author Melody Beattie. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It makes what we have enough and more. I did this meditation, took my headphones out, and I was suddenly overwhelmed with gratitude that I wasn't dope sick. When someone is physically dependent on opiates, if you go 4 to 6 hours without consuming some sort of opiate, you get violently, deathly ill. For years, I had to have some amount of heroin in my body every single day just to be able to breathe or take a step. In that moment, I also saw that there was actually a really beautiful view off of the balcony of my sober living. Now, I had been on that balcony numerous times. I had lived in that sober living more than once, but I had never seen that view before in my life. And it occurred to me, well, that mountain didn't just get there while I was meditating. That's always been there. I just couldn't see it. And it suddenly became very clear to me that my heroin addiction had opened my heart to gratitude. And maybe I didn't need all those things that I thought that I needed to be happy. What I needed was to be able to see that view. Emotional regulation, like meditation, can turn down the volume on our core belief and turn up the volume on our mindful awareness of our present moment and gratitude. The third component in this process is disclosure. This is the act of sharing our stories out loud with other people. Talking through our experiences with someone else helps us process traumatic events as well as rewire our brains around the memory by reliving it while in a safe environment. Allowing someone to bear witness to our story, our truth, is a foundational part of most therapeutic concepts and healing. I never shared in my sobriety meetings, never. I truly believed that I had nothing of value to say. After that day, I slowly started sharing in my meetings, and then I started sharing in my fitness classes at the studios that I taught at around San Diego. And I would share my crazy stories, and my clients would laugh, and they shared their stories. And then they started telling me that I was inspiring them to tackle their own life challenges. And for the first time in a very long time, I found myself in a position to be of service to other people, which is the fourth component in this blueprint for turning trauma into transformation: service. Helping others takes us out of lamenting what we've lost and allows us to take inventory of what we still have. Calhoun and Tedeschi also note that service gives our trauma new meaning by reframing it in the context of now being uniquely qualified to help those that are still suffering. After being someone that took from everyone around me for so long, becoming someone that could actually give to my community was invaluable for my self-esteem. And my narrative slowly started to shift from failure, who didn't graduate college, to incredibly grateful to be able to marvel at views and inspire others. I rewrote my narrative, which is the fifth and final component in this process for turning trauma into positive growth. This positive growth shows up in 5 key ways: greater feelings of personal strength after having survived something, a greater appreciation for life and moments that we used to take for granted, spiritual growth or an enhanced faith in something that carried us through, new possibilities for our lives, like a TED Talk, and stronger relationships with the people that we met that carried us through along the way. Now, just knowing how we can personally turn trauma into transformation is life-changing. But I would like to continue carving out the path that Aurelius, Shakespeare, Viktor Frankl, Calhoun and Tedeschi created, and evolve our agency of thought one step further, which is to use this process and this knowledge in the moment. Rather than waiting years to reflect back and find the growth, we can start to consciously find the advantages in the adversity while the challenging events are happening. I would like to leave you with a journaling technique that trains your brain to start to pick out the good in the bad in real time. Start logging disappointments or perceived failures. Write it down. 1 month later, go back and write down what the lesson learned was from that event. 3 months later, we go back and write down the advantage, the good thing that came out of this. This simple practice trains your brain to start to pick out the lessons and the benefits in the challenging events as they are happening. If we can consciously see the good while the tough stuff is happening, we can manage the emotional turmoil that comes with life's inevitable challenges. A miracle is defined as a welcome and surprising event that is not explicable by any law of nature or science. It is not logical by any law of human nature to see living in a doghouse as a win for your life. Yet I see it as a win. When I was actively using, I needed a miracle. What I didn't know was that I didn't need to wait for one to happen for me. I had the power to create my own miracle all along. That shift in my perspective was a miracle. Trauma into transformation is a miracle. These are in your hands to create at any time. No one in this room is at the mercy of their life circumstances. You are the writer, director, and producer of your life story, and I hope you fill it with miracles. Thank you.